lot of people, like, they ask for this chocolate cake that they want. What they don't realize is that sitting around them is the flour and the sugar and the eggs and all of the things to make the cake. You've got the cake in front of you. You have to put it together. If I'm stressed out, my daughter's gonna feel it, my husband's gonna feel it. To really love and take care of the people around you, I think we really just need to be mindful of what's happening inside that you don't even realize.
Martha, I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you.
We were just tracing our paths in our history of finding each other in Hollywood.
In Hollywood,
in 2022.
Right? Yeah.
Steve Sims, but I've never had the opportunity to sit and chat with you for a while, and so right before we came in here, you were talking about how you've just been in the quiet.
Yeah.
For how many years?
Months, actually.
Months?
Yeah.
Okay, so have you only been in San Antonio or we're not in San Antonio, Austin?
Yeah.
For a couple months?
Well, it's months. April, the beginning of April is when we moved here.
And we're already
ready to go? Yeah.
I don't blame you. I hate Texas. No offense.
Any Austin people I've had because I made it public this last weekend, and I was like, okay, we're going back to Florida.
Wow.
And there were some Texas folks that like took actual offense to it, and they were like,
why would you leave our beautiful state?
Yeah, why don't you like us? And I'm like, it's not about you, it's not you, it's me, right? But yeah, that's it. We've been here since April. We knew almost immediately that Windermere, Florida, which is where we came from, we had been there for 4 years. We didn't realize it had become home, but whenever we got here, it was almost immediate where we were like, oh my gosh, I think we really left something substantial behind us. And it was so, and you don't turn around and move right back. We didn't anyway. We instead looked for what's in this for us.
Yes.
Because the reason that we moved here was very like, almost, etherical. Like it was just very, like we just felt like we were supposed to be here, and we packed up and moved, right? And so I knew there was still going to be something for us, and it has been great. It has been a slowdown. It has been peaceful. It has been finding our family's natural tempo. It has been like, it's been amazing. It's been really, really amazing. And to watch, like I'm just kind of taken off with this, but to watch Nora, our daughter, just be able to make new friends and find friends and know that she has that in her, I mean, there's just so many cool things to watch your kid grow. She's 9, she'll be 10 soon. But just watching her be able to just pick up and, like it was no problem at all for her to do this.
What a gift.
I know. Really.
Wow.
Really. And,
wow.
But she does look forward to going back with her friends and
and what a beautiful experience for her to do something hard and get kind of like a big reward at the end, which is going back. That's not normal.
Yeah.
But to like have a good attitude and have the grit and the gregarious nature necessary to go in and adapt and make the friends, and then you get to go back.
Yeah.
What a happy ending.
Right. Like, I don't know if I had that in me at her age.
Yeah.
I think I was more bashful. She's just, like, she actually, you met my husband at Steve's thing, but she was telling Mike, this has been, I think, like a year or so ago now, but she was like, Daddy, you know the secret about making new friends. Like, like the secret way to make friends. And Daddy's like, no, I don't. And
please teach me.
Right, yeah. And then she said, well, it's a process. You go up to somebody that you don't know and you say, hey, do you want to be friends? And then they'll say yes or no. And then there you go. And that's it. At like 8 or 7, she said that. And I'm like, well, okay. I mean, it does seem very simple whenever you say it that way. But
I love that.
She's just like, well, I could teach people how to make friends. So.
I love that. And what's funny is that it actually isn't that hard as adults.
Right.
We make it complicated because of ego.
Yes. Or like anxiety.
Yes.
Or just all of the,
the myriad of other reasons.
There's
I boiled it down to ego, but yes, and everything else.
Yeah, right.
Fear, anxiety, depression. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so true. What a beautiful thing to experience. And you said you found the natural tempo of your family.
Yeah.
What did that prove to be?
Slow. It's I think I had picked up through my life, and I was in hospitality, so I was in restaurants, like bartending, serving, blah blah blah, for like 14 years, right? And I had picked up a fast tempo, right? Just because you're anticipating needs, and you're always looking for more and more and more and more, and it just is a fast thing that I hadn't realized that I had picked up into just my day-to-day life. And what I realized here is that I enjoy slow, and Mike enjoys slow, and Nora is just going to do whatever we do. She doesn't give a rip, right? And she just likes what we like, at this point in her life anyway. But I realized that I like to take 2-hour walks in like we live right now. We don't live in Austin. We live in Lakeway, which is on the lake. And we live in an area called Old Lakeway, which is like the first 100 homes that were ever there.
Oh,
and so they're back in these like windy roads. It reminds me a lot of like, my family has a cabin in Estes Park, Colorado, and it reminds me of those windy roads as you're going up mountains. And there's so many deer and like foxes and coyotes and like just stuff running around, right? And I just really enjoy the quiet of just going and walking for a couple of hours. And I never would have thought that before.
Wow.
And coming from, the Orlando area, which is like the busiest stretch of highway in the U.S.
Rather awful.
That coming from that into just like the polar opposite of it was just it was such a breath of fresh air that now I get to take this back, to like the home and the community and the relationships and all of that stuff. But I get to take this thing that I've learned back, which is just the coolest thing.
I love that.
Yeah.
How have you on a personal level changed because of the stillness?
I think that I've become less anxious and panicky. And even when I was parking today, usually that would be a whole ordeal for me. That would be a very I always felt like I needed to do things quickly and perfectly, and if I didn't, I would kind of beat myself up, and I would just, tensions would rise and whatever. And I think now, I can just be more laid back with myself. I can be easier on myself, which then allows me to be easier on everybody else, because energy is... I mean, if I'm stressed out, my daughter's going to feel it. My husband's going to feel it, not because I'm trying to project, but because you can't help but it, And so to really love and take care of the people around you, I think we really just need to be mindful of what's happening inside that you don't even realize is affecting everybody else. And I think that grounding of myself is really permeating what's going on in my house right now too.
I totally believe that.
Yeah.
The concept, my therapist told me 3 years ago, he was like, I think you need to work on being. And so I took out my notebook and I was like, okay, how do I be? What do I need to do to be?
Yeah.
And he never answered me.
Yeah,
right. You don't get it. You're asking for the ABCs of being.
Yeah.
But my thog and kind of my season in what I call the wilderness trained me how to be. And it was those long walks without my phone, without podcasts, without inputs and just allowing everything that's within to have time to gestate for the freedom for outputs. Otherwise, all the inputs, we get clogged. You know, the middle of the funnel gets clogged, and then the outputs are inconsistent and sporadic and not even in alignment with what we want, because our filtration system is fundamentally broken because there's too many inputs.
Yes.
And by way of allowing space and time to be present and experience life, I just remember this visceral moment of like hearing the snow crunch underneath my boots and like actually hearing that for the first time. And it's like when I'm sitting outside and finally my ear tunes into the birds and I finally notice the smell of the flowers I'm sitting right next to, but I didn't notice them for the full hour I've been out here. It's like, oh, okay, I'm here now.
Yeah, that's so good.
And it changes everything, to your point of like, you're pulling into the parking garage and you've maintained that state of being because you've cultivated it over and over and over again in the quiet and in the stillness. And then we can bring that into the noise.
Yes.
And still maintain that peace. Yes. And our families are better for it. Drastically so.
There's no better thing in life, right? Than us being able to positively impact the people that we love most. Like it's so, to be mindful and intentional about the energy that you're bringing into your family and into their lives so that they can then move forward in whatever they're going to do. They're different now, right? Like it's just,
that gives me chills. I love that you paused and emphasized so that they.
Yeah.
Because to your point of how much who we are impacts them, and the way we view ourselves impacts them. Yeah. It's not just our treatment of them, but it's fundamentally our view of ourselves that then is the outpouring of the love or lack thereof.
Yeah.
You know, our lack of worth comes out towards them. Brene Brown and Daring Greatly. Have you read that book? So good. Essentially, she says that kind of same biblical concept of the measure which you use for yourself, you'll use for others.
Yeah.
And the way she phrased it was so good. It's like, okay, the standard to which I hold myself, I am subconsciously extending that to others.
Yeah.
So if I'm viewing myself through judgment, I can't help but not do that to others. And that was a massive wake-up call for me of how do I actually view myself?
Yeah.
Because we don't do that self-audit.
And I was thinking, I've been thinking about my mom a lot. I lost her last year. Well, I kind of lost her 10 years ago. She had dementia it's a rough thing. But I've been thinking about her a lot lately. And even in the whole parking garage, it's so weird. We're just going to talk about this parking garage, but it's a thing. But in the parking garage scenario, I remember thinking like, where is this perfect stuff coming from? Like, where did I feel like I needed to do things perfectly and quickly and right? And where did that come from? And a lot of it came from my mom. And she loved me very much, but she carried that, right? And then I'm like, but where did that come from? And it came from her mom.
Yes.
And it's like,
through, yeah.
And so, to be able to really, I love that we're in such an aware state these days, or such an aware time these days, that we can look at those things and not beat ourselves up over it, but instead get curious, right?
Yes.
And just say,
right.
Okay, so if that's the case, then the antithesis or the stop to that would be doing X, Y, and Z, right?
Right.
And
now you can strategize your life.
Yeah. Isn't that so cool? Like, future generations from us are just going to be leaps and bounds, right? More just aware and profound and able, because of the lack of sort of this straitjacket of expectations and all of this stuff, right? They can just be free, and I think that's so cool.
I love that. So, okay, you have always, to me, represented yourself as free.
Okay.
You're fun nails, funky jewelry, just fun and free. You have that kind of essence on your socials.
Yeah.
That's how you show up to an extent.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's the business acumen and professionalism that accompanies that, but there is an element of freedom that I've experienced when encountering you, and I'm curious how that has played a role in your life on the heels of perfectionism and or in relationship to perfectionism.
Yeah. I think I always saw myself as sort of like black sheep a little bit. I kicked back against what people wanted, but it didn't mean that I didn't internalize it, right? It didn't mean that it didn't still drive the bus. I just didn't want to say it drove the bus.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the visual freedom may have been me trying to create this reality of being free, even though in my head it was just torture, right? Like I used to have, and I don't anymore, and I'm just so thankful I don't, but I used to have massive panic attacks. Like, what did they diagnose? I don't know. What's a diagnosis, right? But they said I had some sort of massive panic disorder. I don't know what it was called. But anyway, I used to have like 20 panic attacks a day, to the point where and they would be bad. Like, I would think I was dying every time. So if you've had panic attacks, you're aware that you think you're dying every time. You do. Wow. And your brain is like, no, you're not, because you just did this 5 minutes ago. But then you're like, well, but this time I am. And then there's a whole thing that happens. And then they start going through cycles, right? So like it'll end 20 minutes later, it'll start up again. And it was just, I remember there were times where like I even sat outside. This was in my 20s. I lived by myself, excuse me, and I sat outside on the steps outside of my apartment, because if I died, I didn't want to be the person that they like find in the house 2 weeks later. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was just, it was that real and weird. And so with all of that was happening internally, I think the freedom, the visual freedom, was just, like I said, me trying to create this reality that I wanted, that I really wanted.
Yes.
And so I'm trying to build this house, and I'm not present in the house yet, but I'm trying to build this house and make sense in it somehow. And beautifully, the panic attacks have gone away. I don't have any of them anymore. I mean, I did have one a couple weeks ago, but it was just one, and it didn't do, it didn't do anything crazy. But yeah, I think the freedom, the pendulum swings, right? So like we'll experience a really intense something, and then the pendulum will swing back, and then we'll have an intense something else. And I think the intense sort of perfectionism and having to be right, whatever right meant, I had to be that all of the time, or not even right. I had to look right for people. That was the familial thing, right? It wasn't. It was an odd thing. Anyway, and then on the other side is just let me be who God created me to be and nothing else, right?
What moves you closer to each end of the pendulum? Like habits, practices, ways of thinking.
Yeah. I try not to go this end of the pendulum, but if I edge toward it, it's usually things like things that actually require, so like the parking garage, you have to do things a certain way in there, so it's when it starts to require that I do so, like, yes. I'm like, okay, I have my ticket.
Yes it's when you have to act within a box.
Yes.
Kinds of rules.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so it starts to trigger that.
Yes.
But are you doing it right? Are you doing it right?
Right.
And then I check things. I get real OCD at that point, and I'm never OCD.
Yeah.
But I get OCD at that point where I'm like, okay, do I have it? And then, but to the freedom end of the spectrum, it's kind of like a check-in. It's just, how do I feel right now? Do I like what I'm doing? Do I like how I'm showing up? Do I like what I'm doing? You know, like when in relation to my work, or in relation to how I'm treating my family, or how I'm just showing up. It's kind of just these momentary check-ins that just naturally happen, where you're like, excuse me, where you're just like, do I like this? Do I like this? And that's just kind of a constant thing.
That's good.
But yeah.
That's good. Do I like this? And it's there when you think of that question. What do you measure it again? Like, is it a sensation that it's like, okay, no, I don't like it because I'm not, my sensory system's off?
Yeah.
Or do you line it up against an ideal or your values, or how do you kind of make that decision?
It's a sensory system.
Okay.
But it's a sensory system that's based on ideals, right? So I have a very, very, very close like relationship with Jesus, with God. Like this is a very, it's on a cellular level, right? And so if I didn't have that, I wouldn't trust my emotions. But I feel like I have discernment, and so I'm able to trust that discernment. Of course, also just praying about it. I pray about everything. Like it's like a constant conversation all day long. And so whenever I'm checking in and seeing that, yeah, I guess there is an automatic, is this in alignment with what God wants for me? But that also is what would feel right. You know, so they're one and the same.
That's so good. Have you always been that in tune with your like sensory reaction, or was there ever a time that you had to come back to center and really learn that?
I think, I couldn't trust it. I couldn't trust it always. That's, like I said, now that I have the relationship that I have, which is really, really just built up within the last 5 years, honestly. I grew up in church and that sort of thing, but I grew up checking boxes, and it wasn't really it's not the relationship that I have now, unfortunately, but it is what it is. I'm glad it is what it is now. But so you can't trust your emotions if it's, or even that sort of alignment. In my opinion, I can't trust my alignment if I'm not close with.
Yeah, the source.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah.
And how does that show up in business? Like that ability to align and influence everything on the personal level.
Yeah.
How does that play a part in your business?
It's everything. Every single thing that I do has to do with my beliefs and with my faith. And I don't necessarily always say it, but I don't need to. It's, when we look at just the sentence, he washed feet, right? Like when we just look at things like that, Jesus was love. Jesus is love. And that's how I show up to my people. That's how I show up to my family. That's how I show up in everything that I do, is in a space of love. And if our job is to be his hands and feet here, then I do that in every way capable. And I believe that's why I have the platform that I have right now, and it's not lost on me. I haven't done any of this on my own. I have no formal criteria that would give me the right to do any of this on my own. It's all absolutely given to me for a purpose, I believe. And so that's, again, not lost on me. And I make sure that that everything that I do is to the glory of God, period. And that's it.
And would you say that that's the purpose? Like you said, it's given to me for a purpose. And what is the end goal of that purpose?
Yeah. I think, well, there's our job and there's God's job, right? And there's Holy Spirit's job. There's a whole thing. The whole team. But our job is really just to, and my job in specific here in this question is just to show up as Jesus would show up, like in those moments, and to show what it looks like to be a believer, because in this world, there's narratives, right? And there's beliefs about what a believer of Jesus is and what they look like and how they are. And unfortunately, some of those narratives, I'm not saying that they're not true, because I think people have they've messed up the message a bit, because we're humans and that's what happens. And in that messing up of the message, there's been a lot of hurt, and there's been a lot of pain, and there's people being people. And my job is just to show that being a believer doesn't necessarily look like what maybe you think it looks like, right? Because if you grew up with church hurt, if you grew up with somebody berating you for being XYZ, like if you grew up in abuse and abuse in the name of Jesus,
yes,
then that's a lot of people in the 80s and 90s. That's a lot of people. Yeah. And so I think my job, and I get messages, which is very cool. I get messages from people that say, I'm so glad that you talk about, whatever you talked about, because I've now got a relationship with Jesus as well. And that's my end game, is just to open up people's eyes that it doesn't have to look the way they thought it had to look. Because quite frankly, a lot of people over the years have used Jesus' name in vain. Using Jesus' name in vain, or using God's name in vain, isn't saying, oh God, or whatever. That's not actually using his name in vain. Using God's name in vain is using him for your agenda. That's using it in vain, and that's happened a lot, right? And so I would just hate for people to believe that that is the truth when it's not. And so I just try to live out the fact that that's not the Jesus I know. So
I really appreciate hearing that. The points in my life when I've been the most broken, church was the place I didn't want to be.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people who have experienced that, and it's devastating.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
It is. Because that's exactly where the biggest stuff can happen for us, is in those moments when we're fully emptied out, right? Like those moments where like you can't rely on anything for yourself. Like you can't pull yourself through. But whenever God gets a hold of you and pulls you through in those situations, all you can say is, God did that, right?
Yes.
Like, there's no way I could have done that. But yeah.
But then your part in it all. So, because I hear people say that, God, and they'll attribute everything to God. But then you said you've got your part, God's part, the Holy Spirit's part.
Yeah.
So how does that fall in alignment with God did it all?
Yeah. No, okay. I love this question. This is great. This is a good conversation.
Good.
I talk about this chocolate cake.
Oh, I love chocolate cake.
See, I know
I wanted chocolate cake yesterday. Oh my god.
They have it here in Austin.
I will go find it.
Right?
Should have it for dinner tonight.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be great. But the way I see things is, a lot of people, like, they ask for this chocolate cake that they want, right? They're like, I want that icing. I want it to be like the kind that's like wavy on top, and it's like this little round cake on its little platter and all of that. And they're imagining the cake, and they're really wanting the cake and that sort of thing. But then what they don't realize is that sitting around them is the flour and the sugar and the eggs and all of the things, right, to make the cake. And they don't realize that, like, you've got the cake in front of you. You have to put it together. It's required for us to do things, right?
Yes.
In order for the Jordan to stop running as they were crossing the Jordan, and then the Jordan just stopped so they could cross, which is like rushing water. But the Jordan didn't stop and then they crossed. They put their foot in the water and then it stopped. But it's always required that we take a step first, that we take a step in faith, that we do what we're called to do. But that's because I imagine the next question would be, well, how do you know what you're called to do? And that's really where just having a relationship and even just being, I remember when I first came back, because I left, I was very like prodigal, whatever. I came back and I remember I was in full surrender. I remember dropping to my knees in my basement when I still lived in Iowa and just saying, God, I don't want to drive the bus anymore. Like, I just don't want to. It's your bus. You take this bus. Like, Jesus, take the wheel, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be even trying to control this thing. And that was my prayer. And I think a lot of us, whenever we come to those moments in our lives where we just can't take it, that's where God really gets to show up. But we have to just let go and then listen and just say, let me know the next step forward. My prayer is always, show it to me in a way that I can't miss it, right? That I can't not see it. That's actually the way I say it. Show me in a way that I can't not see it. Like, make it neon lights for me, because I am flighty and I will think of all sorts of different things, but I don't want to think my idea is your idea. I want to know that your idea is your idea, right, and that's where we go. And so, yeah.
I love that. So I want to circle back to this in a second, but first I want to ask about the tattoo on your arm.
Yes. Revelation 3:8. So that is, I am an open door that no man can close. And it was written to, hang on just a second. It was written in Revelation. It was the only letter written to a church that did not kind of tear them a new one, because there were a lot of churches that needed some guidance. They were kind of going off sides or whatever. This was to the Church of Philadelphia, and it's the only church that actually got praise. And the reason they got praise is because they led in love, period. And so then it said, I know you've kept my name. I know you don't have much, but because you've kept my name, I am now an open door that no man can close. Like, and that's the whole. So that's the leading in love.
Leading in love, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. What was that catalytic moment in Iowa?
In Iowa? Oh, we had so much going on up there. I was running my agency at that point. We had a pet magazine that we were running, like a print magazine. We had so many different things going on, and Nora was 2 or 3 probably. And it had just, we hit fever pitch. I hit fever pitch. I hit where there was so much going on that I couldn't enjoy it. I was too busy. And I needed it to be easier. I could just, how you have these brief shining moments in your life where you're just, you can kind of see down the road if nothing changes, if everything stays the same, and you can kind of see down the road. And I was like, I don't want that. Like, I don't want that. I had already quit my job. So I worked at GoDaddy before. And I had already, I quit my job and was working from home. And that was, what I wanted to be doing. But what had happened is I had started working so much that it was just another another job, but it was worse because I was there but couldn't really hang out with her. So.
And then that was you essentially just put your hands up.
Yeah. I just hit a moment where I was like, it's kind of just like mercy. I need help because I don't want to do this.
And then what happened after that?
That was when I was already kind of creating courses about how to do different things, right? Digital marketing things. And so I was already kind of doing that. And I had joined a company. I didn't intend on joining the company, but I did. It was a network marketing company, it's Young Living. And I had hit a rank that typically took 3 to 4 years. And I think it was 3 to 4 or 4 to 5. It was a lot. And I had hit that rank in 6 months, just based on, digital marketing stuff. And whenever I did that, I got the attention of everybody. And then I was like, well, I already make courses. Why don't I just make a course about how I just did this thing, right?
Good for you.
And so I did that, and it just blew up like crazy. That was my first course that actually hit 6 figures a month.
Nice.
And then I just, have kind of been following divinely led footsteps ever since. So
I love that.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. Once you kind of live in that state of surrender, I think that there's a large degree of vulnerability that then lends to creativity to see.
Yes.
Because no longer is it this agenda that you're forcing, right? And taking all these pieces that are life and forcing it into the funnel that's, okay, this is how it's supposed to be, but rather you're able to just see with a completely different perspective.
Yeah.
Because so often the expertise that we hold that makes us so different from everyone else that we really have as a gift that we can serve people with. It's usually not at the forefront of our agenda because it's so innate. Yeah. And it's such a gift in us.
Yeah.
So once we get out of the way, I love that. That's so good.
Yeah.
Did you have other people, I guess when they kind of shined the limelight on you, that's when you realized, oh, like this is something I could actually teach.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it was when people were starting to like, they were kind of, meerkatting a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, they don't know how to do this.
Yes.
Right. And when I joined that company, I remember I was kind of like searching around and seeing like, because coming from GoDaddy, you know that when you have a good salesperson, you're going to repeat best practices. You're going to find out what the best practices are, and you're going to repeat the best practices, right? And what I quickly found out in network marketing is that that's not what they did. If you were good, you didn't share it with anybody else because you only wanted it for your team. And so I came in and was completely different, where I was like, man, I just blew this up. And then I was like, want to see how to blow yours up?
I love that.
and so just completely turned it on its head.
I love that.
And that's been, and now that's like, that really helped me develop my character online, or people being able to see my heart for giving and for serving, right? Is just that moment of, do you want to see how to do, like, let me show you how to do it. Because it was cheap. It was like a $67 course or something. Yeah. It's not even very, it's not like I was charging a ton of money for it. And so there was, I never really, it's so interesting because when you said then what happened, I was like, well, what did happen? But whenever I came up with that course, I went to bed one night. So I had already found that success, right? So I'd already hit the rank and people were asking and blah, blah, blah. And I went to bed that night, and it was one of those things where you wake up at 3 a.m. and you get an idea. And then I took note, right? Because I'm not stupid. I'm not going to ignore it. So I noted it as an idea. And then I was like, okay, I'll do it in the morning. And I could not go back to sleep until the thing fully flushed out, came out of me at 3 a.m. I went and I sat down, just got onto a Google Doc or something and was taking notes, outlined the entire thing, filmed it the next day, and then started. And that's where it just...
Wow. Good
it was
for
wild.
you.
But that's like it was surrender into that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's the action. It's making the cake.
It's the making the cake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good because there are so many people who have the inspiration,
Yeah.
who have the idea and the vision.
Yes.
And then lack the follow through.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Or the confidence, right?
Yes.
Because they'll think, well, there's so many, even of my students, that will say like, well, so-and-so's already doing this.
Yes.
And I'm like, but so-and-so doesn't have your flavor. They don't have your perspective. They don't have your history. They don't have, the same people that are going to listen to me or want to learn from me aren't the same people that are going to want to learn from somebody else. There's, there's room for all of us here.
Right.
And the world needs all of us. Because this, the people that require you to be able to serve them or teach them or mentor or whatever you're doing, coach, they need you. And they're not going to receive it the same from somebody else.
And so I thought this earlier when you made the course for everyone at Young Living, correct?
Yes.
And so most people, to your point, would want to keep it for themselves.
Yeah.
And it was impressive on me. You have such a abundance mindset. And that goes into that whole analogy of encouraging your students. There's enough to go around.
Yeah.
Yeah. And really if the heart is giving. So I feel like what's at the heart of the scarcity mindset?
Yeah.
Because that might be the fundamental shift that is necessary to then be able to create, because creation is so vulnerable.
Yeah.
So if we're not willing to be open to give, we're fearful, whatever it is that's keeping us closed off from the place of openness and vulnerability to us create. I think that's so critical.
Yeah.
What is ultimately at the root of the scarcity?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think first of all, I have to think of when I experienced scarcity before. I think, the fear, right? It's a massive fear thing. And my scarcity was like in my 20s even, just of like not having enough and not like knowing what was ahead of me and all of that stuff. Like it was just, kind of like scary times. But I wonder so this is like a curious thing. I wonder what people's core of scarcity really is.
And being curious about it, a childlike approach to our own selves about the things getting in the way and asking why. There's so much, we think about kids and there's so much vulnerability with kids because there's no ego or fear until they learn those traits. Unfortunately.
Right.
A lot of times by no fault of their own, but that comes in and kind of convolutes and corrupts the purity of the vulnerability and creativity and dreaming.
I love kids.
Oh my gosh.
I love watching kids. I love watching my kid.
When she got her glasses. Oh. That was just the most beautiful. You have to tell that story. It was so beautiful.
She is just the best kid. But so I got drug a little bit for that as a mom of a 9-year-old that didn't know that her kid couldn't see.
Did you? Of course. There's always going to be something wrong with our...
I was like, okay, touche. That's fine. But I'm not going to internalize it. I'm not taking it with me, friends. But so she said we homeschool. And she was at homeschool co-op and she couldn't see the whiteboard. And then I was like, oh, okay, interesting. So I took her to the eye doctor and they were like, oh my. So one
oh no.
Yeah. When they make noises like that, you're like, oh, shoot.
Touche.
Am I? Yeah. One eye was negative -5, and one eye was -1.25. To put it in perspective, legal blindness is -2.5.
Jeez.
So we're halfway.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're not that
Sweet
we're trying
girl.
to go there. Yeah, we're not doing that. But yeah, they found that out. They got the prescription for us. I took it to Zenny because I love Zenny. And I have no deals with Zenny, but I love them. And so they show up in the mail. She opens it up, and she goes to put them on. And I'm like, wait, hang on. And I was making sure that Daddy was coming down the hall so he could see too, because I'm like, this is going to be intense because she's going to be able to see. Because she kept saying, Mommy, I can see. And I'm like, you don't know what you can't see.
Yeah.
Right? And so she went to go put on her glasses, and instantly her eyes went, and she was like, Mommy, I can see your freckles.
That was the cutest. Oh.
It was the best. And then she proceeded to run around the house screaming at the top of her lungs, like, I can see. She could see the leaves. She could see everything. And she's just an amazing kid. And, but yeah, now she can see. She wears her glasses all the time. She tells me of new things she can see all the time. Like, we'll be driving, and then she'll be like, oh, there's a building over there. I didn't know there was a building over there. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I would always like laugh because I would say, Nora, there's a deer. And she'd look and she'd miss it. And I'm like, man, baby, you always miss the deer. And now I realize, like, legit, the girl could not see the deer.
Oh.
And yeah, so it's, yeah.
What a good, that's such a sweet story. Oh my God. Okay, so what did she do this morning? I'm sorry, I derailed you.
Oh yeah.
But it was worth it.
She did something else cool this morning. We could do a whole show of just about Nora. But so homeschool co-op day is Monday, and that's today, as we're recording. And we do once a month, we have like these days where they're called feast days. And so in geography, they will cover different, geographical places, right? And right now they're doing different states in the U.S. And so feast day for this month is all of the states that they covered this month in geography. And so Florida was one of them. And we're like, oh, well, we know Florida. Except Mommy doesn't cook, I have my thing about chocolate cake, but I don't really cook.
You bake, obviously.
Yeah, right. There's that. And so, like, everybody's mommies brings, like, all of this amazing food and stuff, but I bring, like, paper plates and that sort of thing. But Nora wanted to do it today. Like, she wanted to do it because she came up with this idea. And she wanted to bring Florida orange juice.
Oh, cute.
We still didn't have to cook. But we went to Target last night, and she wanted a specific kind of clear plastic cup so they would be able to see through it. And then last night she made 30 labels, which is literally like her cutting paper and then writing on it Florida orange juice with a heart and attached it to every cup. It was the sweetest.
That is
thing.
So cute.
She poured everybody their cup of orange juice for them. Like, it just was.
Oh, Martha, that's so wholesome and sweet. Oh, my God.
She's just like, she's a nurturer.
Yeah.
She's a giver. And you can see it in her heart right now. And my job as her mom is to make sure that nothing gets in the way of that.
Right.
And that we just keep that Care Bear heart just fully focused on what she wants to do, and keep her safe in that, and let her know that, like, it's, as she grows, it's like letting her know how to have good discernment in this world, but to not lose that heart, right?
Beautiful. Man, if all of us were to take that tender direction and protection and assign it back to who we were as children, so that the purity of who we are at our core that has been covered up and corroded by ego, fear, all those things that we learned in childhood, to wear his armor to protect us.
Yes.
But if we become the protector of our soul, then it can come forth.
Yeah.
I love that, because the nurturing and care that you're giving her, man, who would all of us be if that core part of us was free and vulnerable and creative and alive, how many more people would experience love? You said lead by love, you know? And it sounds like you're doing that for you and for her and really just leading by example.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it.
It's that we get to live some pretty amazing lives here when the royal we. Whenever we get to open up and really see what this whole thing is about, right? You know, like it's so cool, instead of kind of like the polarization that the media needs you to believe is true and all of this sort of thing, instead of just really moving into a place of just love and not an agenda of love for a purpose, but just love for the sake of love.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yes. So many people have been hurt by religion and the system of even theology, perhaps. Yeah. Anything other than relationship. What would you say? I mean, how do you encourage people, even listening now, to kind of revisit the religious concepts that probably a lot of us experienced in childhood,
right?
But we've just been so hurt and wounded. How do you encourage us to step into and step toward healing in order to then reanalyze? You know, what parts of that are true? Well, how can we even do a full analysis objectively of what is true from what we were trained and taught to believe when there's so much hurt?
Yeah. I think the very first thing is being allowed to feel that, being allowed to have that be real, because so many people, this is upsetting to me, but there's so many people that were forced to push that down, maybe even in order to feel safe in their family.
Wow.
That there's some deep stuff there that I think my very first, whenever I talk to anybody, my first thing is like, let's just talk about what happened.
Yeah.
Like, it happened. I'm not going to sit here and say this did not happen. Like, let's actually if you want to talk about it, then let's talk about it. And then just love them in that space. And then just it's reminding people that the people that hurt them are really, I mean, it wasn't Jesus that hurt them, you know, it was a person, and the person had problems, and the person had whatever the person was going through. I would never say it's okay because the person X, Y, it's not okay. End of sentence. Hard stop. Not okay.
Yep.
Also, that's not Jesus, and it was a bad representative of Jesus. So, and then from there, this is where we say the my job and God's job. It's God's job after that, right? Like he's the one that chases down the one, leaves the 99 and chases down the one, right? That's what he does for us, right? So that's not mine to do. My job isn't to convince. That's not my job. My job's to love, and then he does what he does, and that's it. I think too many Christians are trying to be closers and trying to be convincers, and it's just not their role, and they're not suited for it.
Right. Man, trying to be closers, isn't that the truth? Gosh. Yeah. Martha, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just am so grateful that you came, and I know you 48 hours into a launch, you've got millions already coming in, and you're here with us. So.
I'm having so much fun. I get to go, it's kind of a free mom day, right?
I love it.
So, I might go to the Domain for a bit and then meet you out for dinner. But,
I love it. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So grateful for you. How can people find you, follow you? I think that there's a lot more people who need to be creative And I know that you give people kind of the tools to bring that to life.
Yeah. My website is just withmartha.com. I don't put my last name in there because nobody can spell it. So it's just withmartha.com, but that's like the hub for everything. So
I love it.
you'll
With
find what you're
Martha.
looking for. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you.